You're being ridiculous, Ava. Ryan needs this more than you do, my mom said, waving the deed in my face during what was supposed to be my housewarming party. He has a family to support. What do you have? Just yourself? The words hit like a slap. I stood in the kitchen of the house I had spent my entire life savings on, struggling to breathe as my world crumbled around me. My name is Ava Carter, and at 32 years old, I never imagined my own family would betray me like this. I had spent the last decade working my way up as a nurse at St. Vincent's Hospital. Long shifts, double shifts, holidays spent in the ICU instead of with friends. Every spare dollar went into my savings, building toward one dream, owning my own home. That dream was supposed to be this house. But apparently in my family, agreements don't mean much. Across the room, my stepbrother Ryan leaned against the counter with his usual smug grin. He had never contributed a dime to our parents' well-being, always between jobs, always chasing some new business idea that flopped before it even got started. But now, at 35, he had a pregnant wife, and suddenly, that made him more deserving of my investment. We've already filed the paperwork, my stepdad Paul chimed in, not even bothering to look at me. The house is in Ryan's name now. You should be happy. You're helping your brother start his family. The casual way he dismissed my sacrifice made my blood boil. I looked around the room at the guests, family, old friends, co-workers, who had come to celebrate what I thought was my home. I could see the awkward glances, the whispered conversations. In the corner. My Aunt Linda, who had always been more of a mother to me than my own, shook her head in disbelief. My best friend, Natalie, stood stiffly near the door, gripping her drink so tight I thought the glass might shatter. This isn't right, I managed, my voice shaking. That money was everything I had. We had an agreement. My mom sighed, rolling her eyes. Oh, stop being so dramatic, Ava. You're a nurse. You'll save up again. Ryan needs a stable home for his baby. It's not like you have anyone to provide for. And that was when something inside me snapped. Years of being the responsible one. The reliable one. The one who sacrificed without complaint. I looked at their entitled faces and knew they had no idea what I was capable of when pushed too far. Growing up, I had always been treated differently from Ryan. After my dad passed away when I was 6, my mom remarried within a year. Paul came into our lives with Ryan, who was 2 years older than me, and immediately became the golden child. While I worked part-time jobs through high school to save for college, Ryan was gifted a brand new car on his 16th birthday. While I studied for nursing exams, Ryan blew through our parents' money on failed ventures, a car wash, a supplement company, some cryptocurrency scheme. And each time he failed, they bailed him out. They refinanced their house 3 times for him. They drained their savings. Meanwhile, I put myself through nursing school, working night shifts as a CNA, taking out student loans I was still paying off. But despite everything, when my parents called me 6 months ago, desperate and in tears because they were about to lose their home, I didn't hesitate. I had been saving for my house, a small cottage, something cozy where I could finally put down roots. Instead, I handed over $175,000, every penny I had. The deal was clear. I would provide the down payment, and the house would be in my name. For weeks, we looked at houses together. I fell in love with this beautiful colonial on Oakwood Drive, picturing holidays here, quiet mornings on the front porch. And when we signed the initial paperwork, my mom had hugged me tight and said, "You're such a blessing, honey. We'll make this work as a family." I had believed her. I wanted so badly to believe her that I ignored the warning signs, the whispered phone calls between my mom and Ryan. The meetings with their lawyer that I wasn't invited to. The constant delays in finalizing the paperwork. Natalie had tried to warn me. "Ava, get everything in writing," she had said over coffee one morning. "I don't trust them to do right by you." But I defended them. Even if they favored Ryan, I told myself, they wouldn't actually steal from me. After all, what kind of parents would do that to their own daughter? The day before the housewarming party, I went to Target, excitedly picking out decorations, fluffy towels for the bathrooms, throw pillows for the living room, a welcome mat that read "Home Sweet Home." Now all of those things felt like cruel jokes, scattered around a house that had been stolen from me. I sat alone at the kitchen counter, staring at my phone, while around me, guests continued celebrating. People were congratulating Ryan, avoiding eye contact with me. Natalie slid into the seat next to me and leaned in. "You need to call Matt," she whispered, referring to her older brother, a real estate attorney. Something's not right about how they transferred the deed. They couldn't have done this legally without your signature. Just then, Ryan walked by with his wife, Claire, talking loudly about their renovation plans. We'll probably gut the kitchen first, he said, running his hand along the granite countertops I had picked out. Maybe knock down a wall or two. Really make it our own. My stomach lurched. I glanced around the kitchen and noticed a folder sitting on top of the refrigerator, the same one that had held the paperwork we signed together. While everyone was distracted by Ryan's big plans, I quietly grabbed it and slid it into my bag. I need some air, I told Natalie, heading for the back porch. Once outside, I pulled out the documents with trembling hands. And there it was. The original agreement I had signed, clear as day, stating that the house was in my name. Then I found something else, a letter from their lawyer dated just 2 weeks ago. It was a warning, stating that transferring the deed without my consent could be considered fraud. My phone buzzed with a text from my mom. Stop sulking outside. Come back in and be happy for your brother. That was the moment I knew what I had to do. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about standing up for myself. With shaking hands, I texted Matt. Are you free tomorrow? I need legal help. His response came quickly. Natalie told me what happened. Come to my office at 9 a.m. Bring everything you have. I walked back inside and found my mom, Paul, and Ryan huddled in the living room, probably making even more plans for my house. They looked up as I entered, their faces a mix of annoyance and dismissal. Finally decided to stop being dramatic? My mom asked, raising an eyebrow. I smiled. They were expecting tears. They were expecting me to give in. But I was done playing the part of the nice, obedient daughter. I grabbed my purse and headed for the door. Ryan laughed. See? She'll get over it. I turned back one last time. No, Ryan, I said, my voice calm but deadly serious. I won't get over it, but you'll wish I had. I barely slept that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the weight of betrayal pressing down on my chest. Over and over, I replayed the moment my mother waved the deed in my face, telling me that Ryan needed the house more than I did. As if my years of sacrifice meant nothing. As if I was just an afterthought in my own family. But this time, I wasn't going to let them win. By morning, exhaustion was replaced by cold determination. I showered, threw on my best business casual outfit, and drove straight to Matt's office. He greeted me with a firm handshake and a reassuring smile. Good, he said as I handed over the folder of documents. Let's see what we're dealing with. He flipped through the pages, his expression growing darker with each one. After several long minutes, he finally leaned back in his chair and let out a low whistle. They really screwed themselves, he said, holding up the letter from their lawyer. This isn't just shady, it's fraudulent. The original agreement is legally binding, and the deed transfer? It never should have happened without your signature. My hands tightened into fists. But it did, he nodded. Which means we can fight it. And we will. But the house is already in Ryan's name, I said, my voice laced with frustration. Isn't it too late? Matt shook his head. A fraudulent transfer can be reversed. The courts don't take kindly to forged signatures and deception, especially when it involves this much money. His voice softened as he studied my face. Ava, they stole $175,000 from you. That's grand theft. If we push hard enough, this could even turn criminal. I swallowed hard. I don't want them to go to jail, I admitted, even though they probably deserved it. Matt sighed. Then let's at least make them pay. He pulled out his phone and started making calls. By lunchtime, the legal wheels were already in motion. Matt had filed an emergency injunction to block any renovations or sales of the house. That meant Ryan couldn't gut the kitchen or knock down walls like he had planned. Then, we prepared the official lawsuit to void the deed transfer entirely. That was when my phone started blowing up. My mother called 5 times. Ryan called 3 times. Even Paul, my stepdad, who normally avoided conflict, sent a curt text. Ava, this is unnecessary. Let's talk like adults. I ignored all of them. Let them sweat. That evening, I went to work for my night shift at the hospital. Halfway through, I glanced at my phone and saw a text from Natalie. Brace yourself. Ryan and your mom are making a scene outside your apartment. I sighed, already exhausted from the day. By the time I got home in the morning, they were still there, waiting for me. Ryan was pacing near my front steps while my mother stood with her arms crossed, looking furious. I barely got out of my car before she started yelling, What the hell do you think you're doing, Ava? I took a deep breath and kept my voice calm. Taking back what's mine. You're being ridiculous, Ryan cut in, his face red with anger. I have a baby on the way. What were you going to do with that house anyway? Live there alone with your cats? I let out a bitter laugh. That's none of your business, Ryan. What I do with my house is my choice. My mother stepped forward, lowering her voice like she was trying to be reasonable. Honey, let's just... I cut her off. Mom, stop. Don't try to guilt me. You stole from me. You lied. You planned this behind my back. You took my entire life savings and handed it to Ryan like I was nothing. Her lips pressed into a thin line. You'll regret this, she muttered. You're tearing this family apart over some paperwork. No, Mom, I said, my voice steady. You tore this family apart when you decided my savings meant nothing to you. Ryan stepped toward me, towering over me with his usual arrogant smirk. You don't have proof of anything, he sneered. I smiled. Actually, I said, pulling out my phone, I have plenty of proof. Want to see the letter from your own lawyer warning you that this was illegal? Or should we talk about the forged signature on the transfer paperwork? Ryan's smug expression vanished behind him. My mother's face went ghostly pale. She reached out, her voice dropping to a pleading whisper. Ava, we can work this out as a family. There's no need for lawyers. I stepped back. We stopped being a family the moment you decided my money belonged to Ryan. And then, as if on cue, Ryan's phone rang. I could hear Claire's panicked voice through the speaker. Ryan, the police are here. They want to talk to us about the house. What the hell is going on? His entire body stiffened. For the first time, he looked scared. I watched as his face twisted in panic, then fury, then something else. Something that almost looked like realization. He had lost. He just didn't know how badly yet. Without another word, he turned and stormed off, my mother scrambling after him. As I watched them go, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not anger. Not sadness. Not even relief. Just peace. Later that evening, Matt called with an update. Their lawyer reached out. They want to settle. I sat up straighter. What are they offering? They'll transfer the house back to you immediately. They'll also cover your legal fees and pay additional damages. They're scared of this turning into a full-blown criminal case. A slow smile spread across my face. Take the deal, I said. But I want one more thing. What's that? I want them to sign a notarized statement admitting what they did. I want it in writing. No more lies, no more pretending this was a misunderstanding. They stole from me, and I want them to own up to it. Matt let out a low chuckle. Brutal. I love it. I'll let them know. 2 weeks later, I sat across from my mother, Paul, and Ryan in Matt's office. Their lawyer slid the finalized agreement across the table. One by one, they signed. When it was my turn, my hand didn't shake. Ryan looked at me, seething. I hope you're happy, he muttered. You ruined everything. I slid the pen across the table and met his glare head on. No, Ryan, I said. You ruined everything the moment you decided to steal from me. I just made it right. As they left the office, my mother turned, eyes full of tears, her voice barely above a whisper. Ava, can we fix this? I stared at her for a long moment. Then, without a word, I turned away. Because for once in my life, I didn't owe her a damn thing. The moment I walked out of Matt's office, I knew my life had changed. For the first time in years, I wasn't weighed down by guilt, obligation, or the endless demands of a family that had never valued me. I had won. The house was mine again. The lawsuit was settled. My legal fees were covered. I had a notarized statement from my mother, stepfather, and Ryan admitting to the fraud. They couldn't rewrite the story, couldn't spin it into some misunderstanding where I had been the unreasonable one. It was in writing, permanent. But I wasn't done yet. There was still one last thing left to do. A few days later, I met with my real estate agent. You're sure about this? She asked, flipping through the paperwork. This is a beautiful home. You fought so hard for it. I nodded, my decision already made. I don't want it anymore. The house had become a symbol of betrayal, of all the years I had spent putting my family first, only for them to treat me like I was disposable. I didn't want to spend another second walking through those halls, remembering how they had smiled to my face while planning to rob me behind my back. I was done with it. So when a real estate developer offered me well above market value, I didn't hesitate. I sold the house. And just like that, my family lost the very thing they had stolen from me. Word spread fast. Ryan must have thought that after I won it back, I would let him and his wife stay in the house, that I would forgive and move on, and he'd still get to benefit from my sacrifice. But when the sale was finalized and he realized the house wasn't just out of his hands but gone forever, he lost it. My phone rang off the hook. First, my mother, crying, pleading. Ava, how could you? We're family. You didn't even give us a chance to find another place. Then Ryan, his voice a mix of fury and disbelief. You selfish bitch. Where the hell are we supposed to live now? I didn't answer either of them. I let them panic the same way they had expected me to when they stole my savings and tried to push me aside. They thought they would always have control over me, that I would always bend, always be the good daughter who put everyone else first. But they had underestimated just how much I was willing to fight for myself. With the money from the sale, I finally bought the home I had always wanted. A small cottage on the edge of town, with a wraparound porch and a big backyard, quiet, peaceful, mine. No memories of betrayal in its walls. Just a fresh start. Natalie helped me move in, and together, we painted the walls soft, calming colors. Nothing like the bold, showy schemes my mother had always insisted were proper for a family home. Aunt Linda stopped by with fresh-baked bread, beaming with pride. I knew you'd come out on top, she said, hugging me tight. You were always stronger than they gave you credit for, and for the first time in my life, I actually felt it. Meanwhile, my family was falling apart. Without the house, Ryan and Claire were forced to move into a tiny rental. Shortly after, Claire filed for divorce. Apparently, when she went through their finances, she discovered Ryan had been hiding thousands of dollars in debt from her. Credit cards he had maxed out, loans he had taken in her name. It was a mess. She reached out to me once, asking if I could help her find a lawyer. I didn't hesitate. Unlike my mother or Ryan, she hadn't betrayed me. She had just been another victim of Ryan's entitlement. I sent her straight to Matt. Ryan, on the other hand, ended up living with my parents, the same parents who had once believed he was their golden child, their greatest investment. Now, he was a broke, unemployed, divorced man sleeping in their guest room. I heard through the grapevine that my mother had to pick up extra shifts at the boutique she worked at to help cover the rent, and my stepfather was furious that Ryan still wasn't paying his own bills. They had spent their entire lives enabling him. Now, they were stuck with him. My mother still tried to call. She left voicemails, texts, even had relatives reach out. Some messages were angry, blaming me for the family falling apart. Others were pathetic, full of guilt-tripping, saying she missed me and that she hated how things had ended. I ignored them all. I wasn't going to be their safety net anymore. I had given them everything, and it had never been enough. This time, I was keeping something for myself. My peace. One Sunday morning, as I was tending my new garden, a car pulled into my driveway. My mother. She stepped out, looking older than I remembered, her face lined with stress. She stood by the fence, watching me with wary eyes. Your garden is beautiful, she said softly. You always did have a way with plants. I nodded, but didn't stop working. Thank you. She hesitated. We're selling the house, she admitted finally. We can't afford it anymore, especially with Ryan's expenses. I wiped my hands on my jeans and stood up. That's not my problem, she swallowed. Ava, please, can't we just talk? I met her gaze, calm and unwavering. You shouldn't be here without calling first. Her face fell. I miss you, honey. I sighed, crossing my arms. You don't miss me, Mom. You miss what I did for you. She flinched but didn't deny it. We're family, she whispered. That should count for something. Family doesn't steal from family, I said simply. Family doesn't forge signatures or justify theft just because one child deserves it more. You made your choice, Mom. Now you're living with the consequences. Tears welled in her eyes, but I felt nothing. For years, I had given her my love, my time, my money, only to be cast aside the moment I wasn't convenient anymore. Now, I was finally choosing myself. She left in tears. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. That evening, I sat on my porch with Natalie and Aunt Linda, drinking wine and watching the sun dip below the trees. So what's next for you? Aunt Linda asked, nudging me playfully. I smiled, feeling the warm breeze against my skin. Whatever I want. Because for the first time in my life, my future was mine alone. And I wasn't wasting another second on people who had never deserved me. Months passed, and life felt different, lighter, freer. I no longer woke up to guilt-tripping texts from my mother. I no longer had to worry about my savings being drained for someone else's benefit. I no longer lived in a house filled with memories of betrayal. Instead, I had a home that was mine. A small, peaceful cottage just outside of town, with a wraparound porch and a garden that I was slowly bringing to life. For the first time in my life, no one could take this away from me. My family still tried to reach out. My mother would call, leave voicemails, send messages through relatives. Some were angry, blaming me for tearing the family apart. Others were pathetic, laced with regret, saying she missed me and wished things had gone differently. I ignored them all. Because the truth was, they had chosen this. They had chosen Ryan over and over again. They had chosen to steal from me, to lie to me, to treat me like I was nothing more than a walking wallet. I owed them nothing. Meanwhile, my life was finally mine. I threw myself into my career, free from the constant burden of family drama. At work, people noticed the change. "You seem happier," one of my coworkers, Jenna, said one evening as we wrapped up our shift. I smiled. I am, and it was true. Without my family's endless demands, I had the time and energy to focus on what I actually wanted. I applied for a promotion and got it. Charge nurse. More responsibility, but also better hours and a significant raise. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. Ryan's life, on the other hand, had fallen apart. His divorce was finalized. Claire got full custody of their baby, and Ryan was drowning in debt. With no house, no money, and no wife to clean up his messes. He had no choice but to get a real job. From what I heard, he was working as a sales clerk at an electronics store. His first steady job in years. Meanwhile, my parents were struggling. They had counted on Ryan making it big and taking care of them in their old age. Instead, they were stuck paying his bills, covering his debts, and watching as the son they had favored so blindly turned out to be their biggest regret. I didn't feel sorry for them. They had made their choices. Now, they were living with them. One Sunday morning, I was outside in my garden, hands deep in the soil, when a familiar car pulled into my driveway. My mother. I sighed, wiping dirt off my hands as she stepped out, looking older than I remembered. The stress, the financial strain, it had aged her. She hovered by the fence, watching me with sad eyes. "Your garden is beautiful," she said softly. "You always did have a way with plants." I didn't invite her in. I just nodded. "Thank you." She hesitated. "We're selling our house," she admitted. "We can't afford it anymore, especially with Ryan's expenses." I stood up slowly, dusting off my jeans. "That's not my problem." Her breath hitched like she hadn't expected me to be so cold. "Ava, please, can't we just talk?" I met her gaze, steady and unshaken. "You shouldn't be here without calling first." She looked down, fiddling with the strap of her purse. I miss you, honey." I exhaled, crossing my arms. "You don't miss me, Mom. You miss what I did for you." She swallowed hard, but didn't deny it. "We're family," she whispered. "That should count for something." I shook my head. Family doesn't steal from family. Family doesn't forge signatures. Family doesn't justify betrayal by saying one child deserves it more. Her eyes filled with tears. "Ava, please, You made your choice, Mom. Now you're living with the consequences." Her lips trembled, but she nodded, like she finally understood that the old me was gone. She turned and walked back to her car. I watched as she drove away, and for the first time in my entire life, I didn't feel an ounce of guilt. Only peace. That evening, I sat on my porch, sipping wine with Natalie and Aunt Linda, the two people who had stood by me through everything. "So, what's next for you?" Aunt Linda asked, nudging me playfully. I smiled, feeling the warm breeze against my skin. "Whatever I want." Because for the first time in my life, my future was mine alone. And I wasn't wasting another second on people who had never deserved me. Story 2. It all started in the most unexpected way. My name is Emily, and I was just another cog in the corporate machine, grinding away my days until Alex strolled into my life. He was a client for the firm I worked at, and our first meeting was anything but ordinary. There was this spark, an instant connection, something that made the air crackle with energy whenever we were in the same room. "Emily, right? Heard you're the one who makes magic happen with numbers around here," Alex said on the day we met, his boyish face laced with a grin that I could practically hear before I saw it. "Magic might be stretching it a bit," I replied, trying to maintain my composure, "but I do know my way around a spreadsheet." Who was this guy, coming in and throwing words like magic around? Our conversations quickly moved from strictly business to personal interests, dreams, and eventually, our views on life. It was like finding a piece of myself that I didn't know was missing. Alex was charming, not just in a smooth-talking kind of way, but genuinely caring. He listened, really listened, and that was rare. We started seeing each other outside of work, and each date felt like we were peeling back layers, revealing more and more of ourselves. It was exhilarating and terrifying all at once. "I can't believe you actually enjoy pineapple on pizza," I teased during one of our dinner dates. "Hey, don't knock it till you try it. It's the perfect combo of sweet and savory," Alex defended, his eyes lighting up with the kind of passion people reserve for sports teams or favorite bands. "That sounds like something only a madman would say," I shot back, laughter bubbling up from the pit of my stomach. Alex's laugh joined mine, filling the space around us with warmth. Those moments felt like we were in our own little world, far away from the prying eyes and expectations of reality. 6 months flew by in a blur of shared smiles, whispered secrets, and late-night talks about our hopes and dreams. Then, almost impulsively, Alex proposed. It was messy, unplanned, and in the middle of our favorite dive bar. No grand gestures or hidden photographers, just raw emotion. "Emily, I know this isn't fancy, I don't have a ring yet, and we're surrounded by the smell of stale beer, but I can't imagine my life without you in it. Marry me." His voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. In that moment, I realized how deeply I had fallen. "Yes," I said, "but if we're doing this, we're doing it our way. No fuss, just us." Our marriage was quick, just like our decision. We didn't need a big wedding. All that mattered was the promise we made to each other. We moved into Alex's place, a cozy little house that suddenly felt like home because we were together. Life with Alex was like living in a bubble, perfect and undisturbed, until Helen, his mother, decided it was her mission to burst it. Living next door, she had this uncanny timing of showing up right when we least expected or wanted her to. One lazy Sunday afternoon, as Alex and I were lounging on the couch, there was a knock on the door. Before we could even pretend we weren't home, Helen barged in like a hurricane on a mission. "Emily, darling, how are you?" she bellowed, her voice carrying that peculiar mix of concern and accusation. "I'm good, Helen. Just enjoying the weekend," I replied, forcing a smile that felt more like a grimace. "Enjoying, huh? You know what would make weekends better? A grandchild running around?" she shot back, her eyes darting between Alex and me as if her mere gaze could impregnate me. Alex, ever the peacemaker, tried to lighten the mood. "Mom, we've talked about this. We're not in a rush." Helen wasn't having any of it. "Not in a rush? I had Alex when I was your age, Emily. The clock is ticking, you know." Her words hung in the air, a constant reminder of the pressure she was piling on us. It wasn't just the occasional comments anymore. It was every single visit. Dinners were marred by her pointed questions and comparisons to her friends' children, who were apparently popping out grandchildren left and right. One evening, she overstepped more than usual. We were at her place for what was supposed to be a peaceful dinner. The main course wasn't the only thing served. Helen dished out her ultimatum as well. "Emily, I've been patient, but I need to know, are you even capable of giving me grandchildren?" Helen's voice was sharp, each word slicing through the pretense of a familial meal. I was taken aback, anger boiling in my veins. "Helen, that's way out of line. We'll have kids when, and if we want to, and when we're ready, not because you're demanding it." Alex finally found his voice, though it was softer than I'd hoped. "Mom, Emily's right. This isn't just about what you want." But Helen was relentless. "Fine, if you won't do it for me, do it for yourselves. But I want you to get checked out. I need to know the problem isn't from your side." The nerve of her, as if bearing children was some family duty I was failing at. Alex looked at me, his eyes apologetic. "Maybe you should, just to get her off our backs." I agreed, but on one condition. "Fine, but you're getting checked too, Alex. Fair's fair." Okay, anything for peace," he conceded, though I could tell he was just as annoyed. The whole ordeal of getting tested was humiliating and invasive, not to mention completely unnecessary in my eyes. But it turned out to be an eye-opener in ways we hadn't anticipated. Alex's results came back, and the irony of the situation wasn't lost on us. The issue Helen was so concerned about, the delay in expanding our little family, stemmed from her precious son. The aftermath was a blend of vindication and sorrow. I wasn't sure how to feel. I wanted to rage at Helen, to throw her words back in her face, but I also saw the man I loved crumbling under the weight of his own perceived imperfections. Helen's reaction was predictably unsupportive. Instead of rallying around her son, she doubled down on her blame game, pointing fingers at me for not being understanding enough, for not caring for Alex in his time of need. And Alex, well, he wasn't the same. The light in his eyes dimmed, replaced by shadows of doubt and shame. He retreated into himself, leaving me to fend off Helen's barbs alone. Alex's struggle with the news about his fertility hit him harder than a freight train. Instead of facing it head-on, he looked for escape in booze, letting the bottles drown out his sorrows and shame. Nights turned into a blur, with him either passed out or staring into nothing. A whiskey bottle, his only company. One evening, I couldn't just watch him spiral anymore. "Alex, this ain't the way, you know. We gotta face this thing together, not let it tear us apart," I said, my voice a mix of frustration and worry. He just scoffed, the smell of alcohol heavy in his words. "Face what, Emily? That I'm a failure? That I can't give you kids? What's the damn point?" "It's not about that, Alex. It's about us finding a way through this. The doctor said it was unlikely, not impossible. Maybe we see other doctors, explore other options." I tried to get through to him, but it was like talking to a wall. "Other options? You mean raising some other guy's kid? That ain't gonna be my child, Emily. How am I supposed to live with that?" His words were like daggers, but I knew it was the booze and pain talking. "Any child we raise would be ours, Alex, ours. It doesn't matter how they come to us," I countered, but it was like I was speaking a foreign language to him. He just shook his head, sinking further into the couch and his despair. "You don't get it, Em. You'll never get it." That night was just the start. Alex began blowing off work, first with sick calls, then not even bothering. His job, once his pride, now seemed like just another burden. Helen, his mom, only added fuel to the fire. "Emily's not doing enough for you, Alex. A real wife would have you out of this slump," she accused one day, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. I had enough and shot back. "Doing enough? I'm trying to keep us afloat here, Helen. But he needs more than just me yelling at him. He needs help, real help, not just your complaints." Helen glared at me, her voice icy. "My son doesn't need some shrink. He needs his family and a wife who's actually there for him." Her words stung, but I knew standing by Alex was all I was doing, even as he slipped further away, becoming a ghost in his own life. I tried again one night, the silence heavy between us. "Alex, we can't go on like this. I can't watch you tear yourself apart. I love you, damn it." For a moment, there was a glimmer of the old Alex in his eyes. "I don't know how to stop this, Em. I'm lost." It was a crack in his armor, but promises made in desperation are fragile, and as time went on, the depth of Alex's descent became painfully clear. The last straw was his job. They fired him for showing up drunk, if he showed up at all. After that, he just lay on the couch all day, a shell of the man I married. Whenever I tried to reach out, to pull him back, he just headed to Helen's, seeking refuge in the one place that never seemed to help. Days blurred into each other, each one a repeat of the last. Alex on the couch, lost in his own misery, and me juggling 2 jobs just to keep us afloat. It felt like we were stuck in a never-ending storm with no way out. But then something changed. It was a regular Thursday evening when I found out. I'd been feeling off for a while, sick in the mornings and just not myself. On a whim, I picked up a pregnancy test. I remember standing in our cramped bathroom waiting for the result, my heart hammering in my chest. When the positive signs showed up, I couldn't believe it. I was pregnant. I remember the moment I decided to tell Alex. He was on the couch, staring off into nothing, a half-empty bottle of beer in his hand. My heart was hammering in my chest, but I had this crazy hope that maybe, just maybe, this news would snap him out of whatever hole he'd fallen into. "Alex," I said, the words feeling both heavy and light at the same time. "I have something to tell you. I'm pregnant." Alex's reaction was nothing like I'd hoped. He looked at me like I'd slapped him. "Pregnant? How the hell is that possible? You know what the doctor said about me?" I tried to keep my voice steady, to explain the situation calmly. "Alex, the doctor said it was unlikely, not impossible. This baby is ours." But Alex wasn't having any of it. He got up, his anger palpable. "Ours? Don't give me that crap, Emily. You've been cheating on me, haven't you? That's the only way this makes sense." Before I could even process what he was saying, Helen barged in, her timing as impeccable as ever. "What's all this shouting about?" she demanded. Alex was quick to fill her in, his words twisted by bitterness. "Emily's pregnant, claims it's mine, but we both know that's a lie." Helen turned on me, her eyes flashing with accusation. You ungrateful little… After everything we've done for you, you go and betray my son like this? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Betray him? Helen, I've been here trying to make things work even when Alex gave up. This baby is his, whether you like it or not. The argument spiraled from there, with both of them hurling accusations and demands. Helen, in her infinite wisdom, decided I should leave. Get out of this house, Emily. We don't need a liar and a cheat under this roof. I was so tired of the fighting, the accusations, the endless cycle of despair, so I agreed. Fine, I'll go, but not for you, for this baby, who deserves better than this mess. Alex didn't stop me. He didn't say a word as I walked out the door, my heart heavy but my resolve strong. This baby was my glimmer of hope, and I was going to do everything in my power to protect it, to give it the life it deserved, away from all the chaos, away from a love that had turned so toxic it was unrecognizable. Starting over wasn't easy, not by a long shot. There I was, pregnant, alone, and frankly a bit scared. But there was this fire in me too, a determination to make things right for the little one growing inside me. I moved into a small, cozy apartment. It wasn't much, but it was ours, mine and the baby's. I picked up extra shifts at work, anything to make sure we'd have what we needed. Nights were the hardest, though. It was just me and my thoughts, and sometimes the silence was too loud. One evening after a long day at work, I sat on the worn-out sofa, rubbing my belly, talking to the baby. It's just you and me, kiddo. But we're going to make it, you'll see. I'm going to make sure of it. That's when the phone rang. It was my sister, Lucy. She'd been my rock through all of this. Hey, Em, how are you holding up? Lucy's voice was always a balm, soothing and warm. We're hanging in there. Some days are better than others, I admitted, not wanting to worry her too much. Listen, Em, you're not alone in this. Remember that. If you need anything, a break, someone to talk to, or just a night off from cooking, you call me, okay? Her words meant the world to me. Thanks, Luce. I really appreciate it. We talked a bit more about nothing in particular. Lucy always had a way of making me laugh, even when I felt like crying. After hanging up, I felt a little lighter, a bit more ready to face the world. As the weeks turned into months, I got to know every inch of that little apartment. I decorated a corner for the baby, putting together a makeshift nursery. It wasn't much, but it was filled with love. As my due date approached, I felt a mix of excitement and nerves. I was about to meet my baby, to start this new chapter for real. And even though I was doing it on my own, I knew we'd be okay.